Hi guys, it's me, ChazzaHD, and welcome to race 17 of the 2023 Formula 1 season. And of course, it is the return to Qatar for the Qatar Grand Prix weekend. Hopefully you guys are all well. Of course, we've had a couple weeks now since the last Grand Prix in Japan, where we had one of the championships decided. And now this weekend, surely, we will see the wrapping up of the Drivers' Championship. Max Verstappen only needs, I think, 3 points this weekend to become the 2023 Drivers' World Champion. So, yeah, it's going to take quite a miracle for Max not to, to come out of this race weekend and not be the champion. So, yeah, obviously, interest when it comes to that. And whether he'll get it or not, of course he will. And it should be a decent weekend here for this Qatar Grand Prix. Of course, the last Qatar Grand Prix was a couple years ago. I think that time it was like mid-November when we had that race, and it was a decent race weekend. The race was okay from what I remember. We obviously had Alonso on the podium, I think, in that race for the first time at the time. I think it was the first time he'd been on the podium in like 7 years. Something like that. It was, incredible result for Alpine and Alonso. Lewis Hamilton, of course, absolutely dominated the race the entire weekend, really. But yeah, there wasn't really a ton of stuff going on in that Grand Prix weekend. I have to say, though, as we'll get onto in a moment, I really do like this track. Might not be the best track for racing, for overtaking or anything like that, but in terms of a track purely to drive, I think it's really underrated, this Lusail International Circuit. And when we get into the sessions this weekend itself, I think you'll see just how exciting this track can be, especially for qualifying, and definitely in that final sector where it is so incredibly quick. So yeah, it's going to be not a totally terrible weekend, but I'm not expecting it to be the most exciting weekend of the season. And yeah, I'm not expecting us to have a ton of racing, overtaking, whatever you want to call it, this weekend. And of course, we have the sprint race here in Qatar, and I'm not expecting it to be very good. And I will not be covering the F1 sprint race this weekend, which of course will be taking place on Saturday evening here in the UK. I'll get more into why later on, but should be an okay weekend. Let's hope it's a bit better than I'm expecting. But just want to say quickly, I hope you guys are all doing well after the last Grand Prix. Hope you had a good start to October. And no matter what time zone you're in, what part of the world you're from, hope you're all having as best a time as possible. And yeah, obviously it's the weekend preview, so we're going to be going through the usual, looking at map of the track, getting into tracks we've recently been to that have similarities to this track, just to understand what teams should theoretically be quick here. And then we'll get into my initial predictions for the weekend. I'll also update you on a couple pieces of news, and then we'll get through the teams in a bit more depth later on as well. And of course, there is a poll running at the top of the live chat, and the poll is asking who is most likely to stop Red Bull winning the 2023 Qatar Grand Prix. And your options are Mercedes, Ferrari, McLaren, and Aston Martin. So out of those 4 options, let me know, who do you think is most likely to stop Red Bull winning this weekend's race? And I'll get to those results, of course, at the end of the stream. But let's get into the championship standings coming into this race in Qatar. So Max Verstappen, he can win the title in the sprint race on Saturday. All he needs to do is finish in 6th place at worst in the sprint, and he will be, no matter what Sergio Perez does, he will be the 2023 world champion, because he needs at least a 100 172-point lead going into the race on Sunday. And of course, if Max was to score 3 points and then Perez was to win, that would be just about enough of Verstappen to clinch the world title. So that's why that is all he needs to become world champion. My expectation is he'll probably win the sprint race. I wouldn't be surprised if he won it by a very comfortable margin. I'm not expecting Verstappen in the Red Bull to really be challenged this weekend, especially after what we saw at Suzuka, where they were so incredibly good. Yeah, I'd be surprised if Max had serious problems this weekend, or was had serious competition this weekend from, say, McLaren, Ferrari, or Mercedes. So yeah, Max, he's going to win the title this weekend, and it most likely will be in the sprint race. We'll have to see how that goes. And then you've got Sergio Perez in second, who is only 33 points clear of Lewis Hamilton in third. And then Alonso in fourth. Carlos Sainz not too far behind Alonso now in fifth, with Leclerc sixth. Norris up to seventh, level on points of Russell. The reason Norris is ahead is because his best race result this season is better than Russell's best race result. And that's why Lando's up to seventh. And to be honest, with how McLaren are looking right now, I think there is an outside chance with 6 races to go. I think he's got an outside chance, Lando, of finishing in the top 5 of the Drivers' Championship. And then you got, Russell 8th, Piastri up to 9th. Great to see him properly into the top 10 now. And then you got Lance Stroll just about, I think only by 2 points, in 10th place. And with the form he's in, I would not be surprised if he finished in, say, 12th or even 13th in the championship, because he's been absolutely abysmal this season, as we know. And then on the constructor side, Red Bull, of course, are the champions. They won the constructors title in Japan. Congratulations to them. Their 6th constructors title in, 13 years? Which is very impressive, to win that many constructors titles in a 13-year period. Mercedes second. Mercedes, though, only 20 points clear now of Ferrari. And with Ferrari having improved in the last few races, Mercedes have got to still be at their best, because Ferrari, I would say, are looking not likely to finish in second, but I wouldn't be surprised at this point if they did finish in second, because Ferrari looks so much better now than they did, back in July, for example. And then you've got Aston Martin in fourth. Aston Martin, 49 points clear of McLaren, which, it sounds comfortable of a gap. But given how much quicker McLaren are right now, compared to Aston Martin, I think McLaren will definitely overtake Aston Martin in the championship. So that's a battle to look out for. And then you've got Alpine in 6th, Williams in 7th, Haas 8th, Alfa Romeo 9th, and AlphaTauri are last still in the championship. But let's get into this Lusail circuit, and here it is. And again, it's a track I like. It's unique in certain aspects. It's the flow of the track is very nice. Very, very nice. The first sector is decent. I wouldn't say it's amazing, but I do like the flow, especially of turn 1, 2, and 3. Then you go into turn 4 and 5, which are kind of medium speed corners. Then the hairpin of turn 6. And yeah, that first, turn 4, 5, and 6 is after the first sector point. But you see what I mean. The first bit of the lap is, it's got a good flow to it. And then for the, for the middle sector, again, some nice flowing corners. Turn 8 and 9, I really like a lot. It's a very, very good part of the track there where you can really throw your car about. And then really, guys, from the exit of turn 10 all the way until the start-finish line, it's very, very high speed. Obviously, 11 is flat out. Turn 12 is flat out. Turn 13, I would imagine, will be just about flat out. And then turn 14 is going to be maybe not flat, but nearly flat, and then turn 15 again, almost flat, and then into turn 16, which is probably a medium speed corner, but you approach it at such high speed that it seems a lot quicker than it actually is. And then you exit that, and then you're on the start-finish straight. It is similar, this circuit, to Silverstone, Suzuka, certain parts of Spa. It has a lot of good characteristics, does this circuit. And looking at what we saw in Japan a couple of weeks ago at Suzuka, this track, in terms of who is going to be quick here, it's going to be really dependent on what we saw in the first sector at Suzuka, where, of course, the first sector at Suzuka is very similar to a lot of this circuit, where you have not just high-speed corners, but a lot of long corners, which, of course, do put a lot of stress through the tyres. And in that first sector in Japan, Red Bull and McLaren were by far the two best teams in qualifying. Red Bull 0.2 of a second better than McLaren, and then Aston Martin, Ferrari, and Mercedes were miles back and were pretty even in this first sector. The Alpine, not too bad. AlphaTauri were okay. Haas, not great. Williams, not great. And Alfa Romeo, definitely not great. But yeah, Red Bull and McLaren, I think really, looking at this track, they're going to be the two best teams this weekend in any session. I don't think it matters whether it's the race or qualifying this weekend. I'd be very surprised if Ferrari or Mercedes can be one of the two best teams this weekend. Be very surprised by that. After those two teams, though, a bit harder to say exactly where certain teams should be. I think Mercedes and Ferrari will be very close to one another this weekend, especially in qualifying. Aston Martin might not be as bad as what we saw in Japan. Williams, not expecting them to be great. I've got to be honest. After the race in Japan really wasn't a great weekend. Alpine, I've heard people say they're probably not going to be good this weekend, but I actually think this track might suit them quite well and might see them, nick a point from this race. AlphaTauri, of course, they should have a pretty good time around here. We know around higher aero tracks, they do tend to be a bit stronger. So, yeah, I think the pecking order, really, from what we saw in Japan, I don't think it's really going to be that much different here in Qatar. The only difference could be Mercedes versus Ferrari, or maybe, I don't know, Haas or Alpine maybe could be a bit worse or a bit better than what we saw in Japan. But compared to what we saw in Japan, it's basically going to be about the same as we saw a couple weeks ago. So, because of that, let me get into my initial qualifying and race predictions, just so you guys can see where mentally I'm at with my thoughts going into the weekend. So for qualifying, I've gone Max Verstappen on pole position, and then I think by 0.2 of a second, Lando Norris will be behind Verstappen in second, Oscar Piastri third, Sergio Perez fourth, Carlos Sainz just about in fifth, and then I've got Lewis Hamilton sixth, Charles Leclerc seventh, Russell eighth, Fernando Alonso in ninth, and Yuki Tsunoda in P10. I'm pretty confident of that top 10. To be honest, given what we saw a couple weeks ago. And then for the race, not too much different. I've got Verstappen winning by 15 seconds from Norris, and then Perez third, Piastri fourth, Hamilton fifth, Russell sixth, Sainz seventh, Leclerc eighth, Alonso ninth, and Tsunoda 10th. Reason I've got Ferrari a bit further behind is because, of course, around this track where, tyre wear is going to be very critical. We know Ferrari still struggle with that. Yeah, I don't think Ferrari are going to have really the best of times, and will probably struggle quite a bit more than Mercedes will do. Talking of tyres, though, let me just go back to these pictures for the time being. I do want to quickly get into a couple things in regards to the tyres. One thing is, One thing is the temperatures this weekend despite it being a night race, the temperatures this weekend are going to be quite hot. Let me try and find the article where it stated this. So, yeah, for qualifying, temperatures could be well above 30 degrees Celsius, which will be, the track temperature will be very hot. And then for Sunday, what do you call it? For Sunday, it is currently forecast to be 33 degrees Celsius. And again, even though that the race will be starting at night, that is still going to be a bit of an issue for the teams when you couple that with how brutal this circuit is on tyres with a lot of the long, hard, fast corners. So I am expecting this weekend a 2-stop race at least. I wouldn't be surprised even if we had a 3-stopper. And just to update you as well, the 3 compounds Pirelli have brought this weekend are the C3, C2, and C1. No surprise they've gone a lot harder with their tyre choice compared to Suzuka. But yeah, that is one thing to keep your eye on in the sprint race and the race on Sunday, because it is going to be tough on tyres this weekend. No doubt about it. And like I said, should be at least a 2-stop race. Wouldn't be surprised, though, if certain teams, maybe if we get a well-timed virtual safety car or safety car, wouldn't be surprised if certain teams go for a 3-stop race. So, yeah, we'll have to see, of course, whether that does happen. A couple more things to get into, though, before we get into the teams is one, what was I going to say? Oh, I was just on the tip of my tongue and then I completely blanked on it. What was I going to say? Actually, yeah, that's it. Liam Lawson will be racing this weekend. I know there was a bit of doubt that I shared last week in the stream I did about Red Bull, about whether or who would be alongside Yuki Tsunoda this weekend. And it has been confirmed that, yeah, Liam Lawson will be racing once again this weekend in Qatar. Apparently, Daniel Ricciardo did go in the simulator, and the session he did was good, but he still isn't quite ready to return, and will probably return at the United States Grand Prix in Austin, Texas. So Liam gets another chance to show what he can offer, which is great, because AlphaTauri at the minute look pretty strong, and I'd say Lawson's got a pretty decent chance of finishing in the points this weekend, given how AlphaTauri I think will be compared to teams like Alpine and Aston Martin. So yeah, that's it's good to see, another showing from him. Of course, I do want to see Daniel Ricciardo come back, because I do think Ricciardo has got a bit too much criticism in the last few weeks from people that I think have underrated the couple performances Ricciardo put in as Nick de Vries's replacement. And I am keen to see him back, but also I am keen to see Liam Lawson once again show what he's capable of. So yeah, we'll have to see how he goes and how he does in general. And also another thing that I need to quickly get into news-wise is Andretti. Of course, we have gone through the what do you call it? We've gone through the story in the last year or so about how Andretti are trying to get onto the grid for 2025 or 2026. Can't remember exactly what year it is. But finally, we have heard some official news in the last few days. The FIA has officially approved Andretti's bid. But now it's up to F1 to conduct what they say is their own assessment as to whether Andretti, will be on the grid for either 2025 or 2026. Again, I can't remember exactly what year it was they wanted to enter. 2026 makes more sense, but maybe they'll want to go a year early just to get their feet wet before the rules reset 2026. You may be thinking, with all the talk of some of the team owners or team principals on the grid not being too keen on Andretti coming into Formula One, you may be thinking, oh, but they might not actually get onto the grid. The chances are they will get onto the grid, and the reason that is because Formula One is it is based in Europe at the end of the day, and they do have to abide by EU law when it comes to competition or anti-competition. I can't remember exactly what the laws how they're exactly put, but essentially, because of the case Andretti have put forward for entering Formula One, there's not really any realistic way that FOM or Liberty Media can reject Andretti's bid, because if they did, Andretti would probably sue them and take them to court in Europe, and then it would probably get overturned and Andretti would be forced onto the grid, even if the teams were against it, because there's not really, again, a realistic legal avenue for Formula One to reject Andretti's bid. So, yeah, Andretti will be on the grid, basically. We just have to wait probably another few months or a year at most until it is officially confirmed whether they'll be on the grid or not, or when they'll be on the grid in Formula One. It is great news, though, that the FIA have accepted the bid. The FIA have always been more welcoming than FOM or Liberty Media were to new teams on the grid. I understand the argument from people like Toto Wolff and others that, we don't need new teams, and essentially their argument is they need to bring more value to Formula One, when in reality, what they're concerned about is losing a piece of the pie, and maybe what Liberty Media will have to do going forward is increase the share of prize money that all the teams get for a Formula One season. But even if that doesn't happen, then I think, Andretti will still make it onto the grid. But, Andretti, they deserve to be in Formula One. They have proven in America that they are a successful racing organization. They do bring value to Formula One, especially with them having backing from, Cadillac, General Motors. Having that partnership there brings more value to Formula One. People in America know the name of Andretti more than they know the name of Haas, or Haas, however you want to pronounce it. Mario Andretti, of course, former Formula One world champion, so there's a proper connection there to the heart of the sport. Obviously, Michael Andretti, who would probably be the team principal of this team, raced in F1 as well for a season at McLaren. So, they absolutely deserve to be on the grid. And I know the argument has been made by many people online in the last few days, and it is absolutely true, and I do agree with it. If Andretti don't provide value, according to these certain people, then what value do Haas, AlphaTauri, Alfa Romeo bring? It's a worthy thing to ask, because Haas definitely don't bring any extra value to Formula One. If we lost Haas and let's say we lost the Haas team and Andretti took their place, would we really lose anything in terms of value to Formula One? I don't think we would. And I think you could probably say the same for if we lost AlphaTauri and Andretti replaced them. I don't think we would lose any real value to Formula One. The teams that really offer value to Formula One, of course, are the big teams: Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari, McLaren, Aston Martin, Williams. I think Alpine do, but to a much smaller extent than they probably think. And then, obviously, the Alfa Romeo team currently. Obviously, next year they'll be called Sauber, and in 2026 they'll be the Audi team, and of course that will bring more value to Formula One. But if you're going to accept Haas onto the grid, and say that they absolutely deserve their spot, then I don't see why you can deny teams like Andretti or possibly other teams that want to come onto the grid in the future. Obviously, depends who they are, what their backgrounds are, and how viable they are. But yeah, Andretti, we know they're serious. We absolutely know they're serious. They're not going to come into Formula One just to be in Formula One and exist. They're going to come into Formula One to try and win, like they've done in other series. That's what they want to do. They're not here to play. So yeah, great news, and hopefully within the next year we hear confirmation that they'll be on the grid full time for either 2025 or 2026. Anyway, let's now get into the teams in a bit more detail. And of course, I will come to your comments in the chat, so make sure to post in the live chat if you've got any comments you want to add to this weekend's Grand Prix. Plus, of course, the news I just got through there. Make sure to post your thoughts as to with Andretti. How much value do you think they bring to Formula One and all of that? And I'll make sure to get to your comments soon enough. But yeah, let's get through some of the top teams. Red Bull, they're going to dominate this weekend. Sergio Perez, we'll quickly just start with him. Still miles behind his teammate in terms of performance. He was horrendous in Japan, and he needs to at least finish on the podium this weekend as Perez. He cannot afford another absolute stinker, which he did in Japan. That performance in the race, I think you could probably agree, was the worst performance we've ever seen from Sergio Perez. It was horrendous. The penalty he got, it was just very... And I know you may say it was very fine margins, the penalty he got for overtaking under a safety car, on the entry to the pit lane, but it was, just a bit of laziness there. And then, of course, extremely lazy and desperate overtaking maneuver on Kevin Magnussen that got a further penalty and then, of course, retired from the race eventually, even though he came out like 45 minutes later to serve a penalty. Yeah, horrendous performance, and Perez, like I said, he has to at least finish on the podium this weekend, because if he doesn't, pressure will continue to ramp up on whether he'll be at Red Bull long term. And if he keeps putting in performances like he did in Japan and even Singapore to a degree, Red Bull will pull the trigger in terms of removing him from that seat. They're not going to wait around forever for Sergio Perez to get his act together. They've got plenty of drivers who could replace Sergio Perez. Daniel Ricciardo, Liam Lawson, if needed, Yuki Tsunoda. And obviously they've got other drivers probably in the pipeline who they've got hopes for the future. So he needs to really get back on it this weekend. Cannot afford another awful weekend where he's absolutely miles off the pace. If he does that, then he's in big trouble. And like I predicted, I think he will finish in third, but I really hope he doesn't have as bad of a qualifying as he's had at times this season, because that really would put him under serious pressure going into the rest of the weekend. Max Verstappen, of course, only a handful of points away from the championship. And yeah, he's going to win it this weekend. There's no doubt about it. Even if he doesn't win the race, he'll still win the title. I'm pretty confident of that. And yeah, I think he'll dominate the weekend. Pole position, I think he'll win the sprint race, and he'll win the race on Sunday as well. No doubt about it. Not just because Verstappen is in great form, but I think the Red Bull car is just a tad too good for the McLaren this weekend. I think it's got just a bit extra downforce compared to that McLaren. And the Red Bull, as we know, is great in all types of corners, when the McLaren is only really great in the in the high speed corners. And there's a lot of them here, but it's not entirely that. Yeah, Red Bull I think will be the quickest team, and Max Verstappen will dominate the weekend. And Red Bull if they do win this weekend, the race on Sunday, it will be 16 wins in 17 races. Absolutely incredible record that for Red Bull. Now let's go on to the other teams. Mercedes. Yeah, Japan was... I mean, it obviously wasn't good, but I think really in the race, they got the best result they could have, which was, 5th and 7th. Realistically, that was the absolute best they could have got with Sergio Perez retiring. Their pace was pretty poor that weekend. I definitely expected quite a bit better from them. But we have to say, clearly, right now, they are not the fastest Mercedes-powered team. And of course, for them, that is embarrassing because they are the works team. McLaren are clearly faster than them. We saw that in Japan. Lewis Hamilton ended up finishing in 5th, but ended up, I think, half a minute basically away from Lando Norris, which is a massive amount of time to be giving away in a 53-lap race. It really is. So, yeah, McLaren are clearly ahead of Mercedes, no doubt about that. Mercedes, really their fight this weekend is the best of the rest after Red Bull and McLaren. And that fight will be Mercedes versus Ferrari. Ferrari, as we know, will have the advantage in qualifying, as they usually do. In the race, it'll probably swing back more towards Mercedes-Benz. Obviously, a bit of tension there was in Japan after some close calls between Hamilton and Russell. Hopefully, none of those this weekend. But Lewis Hamilton, of course, you guys will remember, had an amazing race here the year before in Qatar, where he completely dominated the weekend and he was on another planet compared to everybody else. He needs to be on that type of form this weekend if Hamilton is going to get a great result for the team out of this weekend, say a podium, because looking at where they are coming into the weekend, I mean, 5th place would be a very good result for them, given where they're at right now, because they've definitely, in the last few races, they've definitely dropped back. They're not as quick as what we saw right before the summer break. So, yeah, Mercedes, not too confident about them. I think, they will finish 5th and 6th in the race, which is a good result considering where their car's at the minute. But obviously, for Mercedes, that's just not good, is it? 5th and 6th, and nowhere near the podium. I think they'll be in the end. That's horrendous for this team that only obviously a couple years ago was winning races and won the Constructors' Championship and should have won, of course, the Drivers' title. So yeah, 5th and 6th in the race. I think it'll be qualifying. I think I predicted 6th and 8th, which is okay, nothing terrible. But yeah, if they are quicker than Ferrari, which would be good, don't expect them to be on McLaren's pace, because I don't think they will be. I think McLaren right now have, not by a country mile, but they have by probably at least 2 or 3 tenths of a second a better car than Mercedes do. And Mercedes better hope that doesn't continue to next year, because it will be even worse next year if they're still that far behind, if not further, for 2024. Next team, Ferrari. Yeah, Japan was, 4th and 6th was probably, well, it wasn't the best result they could have got, because Carlos Sainz was very close to 5th and probably should have got 5th, and Ferrari definitely bottled that a bit with a bit of a poor decision with Sainz's strategy into when Carlos made his final pit stop. But really, 20 points from that weekend was around about the best they were going to get. They sadly were not as quick as McLaren. They were quite a bit slower than I expected them to be honest, in Japan. I thought they would be fighting for pole position, but they were, in the end, they were nowhere near. They were like 7 or 8 tenths of a second off with Leclerc. So, yeah, disappointing from that aspect. And also disappointing because obviously they brought a new floor and side pod, did Ferrari, to the Japanese Grand Prix, their last big upgrade of the season, and it didn't give them any extra performance. So I'm wondering whether maybe this weekend, now that they understand a lot more how the car is with this upgrade and how to best set the car up, with the car having probably changed with this new upgrade being fitted, whether maybe they can get more out of it this weekend and maybe spring a surprise and properly fight McLaren for, say, second, third, fourth on the grid, which would be great. That would definitely make the weekend quite a bit more exciting. But my expectation is third best they'll be in qualifying, but for the race, fourth best I think they'll be in. If they really suffer with their tyres bad, it could be even worse. So yeah, trying to set the car up this weekend the way that can baby their tyres as much as possible will be very, very important for them, because if they're too hard on their tyres, it could really cost them a lot of points this weekend, which of course would be really bad for their fight for second in the constructors. But yeah, as well, another thing to point out is I did have Carlos Sainz ahead of Leclerc in my predictions for qualifying in the race. The reason that is because at the minute Carlos has been performing better than Leclerc has, but also you go and look at the Qatar Grand Prix 2 years ago, Carlos was a lot quicker, at least in qualifying, compared to Leclerc that weekend. So that's why I've got Carlos ahead of Leclerc for this weekend's 2023 edition. But yeah, Ferrari, third best in qualifying, fourth best in the race, I think they'll be. Now let's go on to Aston Martin. I mean, Alonso, he finished in 8th place, which was technically better than what I expected, but their pace was horrendous. I mean, Alonso was, and we only had, 48 or 49 racing laps in Japan. Alonso finished 1 minute and 15 seconds, I think it was, in the end, behind Verstappen, which is a gigantic loss of lap time per lap when you consider where they were in the first, say, quarter of the season. And again, it does amaze me how far they've dropped off. Apparently, they've got another upgrade in the pipeline they might be bringing before the end of the season. We'll have to see what happens with that. But yeah, I don't really have any hope for Aston Martin for the rest of the season, I've got to be honest. Alonso, the reason I predicted him to qualify and finish in 9th is because he was very good here in that race a couple of years ago, where of course he finished on the podium but also qualified very well. So that's why I've got him in the top 10. But I've seen projections this weekend that have AlphaTauri ahead of Aston Martin on pure pace this weekend, and that could very much happen. So yeah, Aston Martin not in a good place. Lance Stroll, of course, will be miles behind, probably knocked down Q1, knowing him, continuing his horrendous performance. But yeah, Alonso is the team's only hope because the car is pretty mediocre right now, which of course is a massive benefit to the McLaren team, who right now have the second best car in Formula One, and I think that will probably continue for most of the circuits we've got remaining on the calendar between now and the end of the season. Their car in Japan was performing very well. And not only were they the second best team, they were the second best team by a comfortable margin. Lando Norris finished in second in Japan, 20 seconds off Verstappen. The next best car, Leclerc, was, I think, 25 seconds behind Norris. Over, 25 seconds over a 48-49 lap, or 48 to 49 lap, green flag racing. That is very, very impressive for McLaren to be that much quicker. And Lando, I've got to say, in the race in Japan was stunningly quick. I know his teammate Piastri did suffer with tyres towards the second half of the race, but I thought Lando's pace was very, very good. But yeah, McLaren, second best team. I think they'll be here comfortably. I've gone second and third in qualifying. And the reason I've got Piastri not finishing on a podium in the race is because, and I think he has admitted this, and Nib, I know, has talked about it a couple times on stream. He is struggling at managing the tyres in the race at the moment. And Nib, he brilliantly pointed out that because he obviously missed last year, last year, he doesn't have that experience that he previously had of managing the tyres. Plus, these tyres are different to the ones used in F2 in 2021. So, yeah, it's just a matter of experience, and hopefully, over time, he will improve on that. I'm hoping he doesn't become one of those drivers that, can produce amazing speed in qualifying, but maybe pushes a bit too hard with their tyres in the race, hoping that he doesn't become a driver like that. Too early to say whether he will be a driver like that. We'll have to wait probably a year or two to see if it's a permanent issue with him. But from what I remember in F2, I don't remember him being someone who punished his tyres a lot. He generally was okay, at least, with his tyre management, if not one of the better ones. So, yeah, hopefully it won't be too bad going forward. But, yeah, because he's still working on that, I think that's what will keep him off the podium this weekend. Great, though, that he did get his first F1 podium in Japan, because it's been a long time coming for Oscar. But yeah, second and fourth in the race, that would be a brilliant result. That'd be, 30 points. Plus, if they can finish second and third, say, in the sprint race, that's another, what would that be? Another 13 points in the sprint. So overall, that would be 43 points. And if Aston Martin only come away with 2 or 3 points, then McLaren would be right on Aston Martin's gearbox going into the final 5 races of the season in the championship. And maybe, because we've also got 3 sprint races to go this season, obviously an extra points available, and with how quick McLaren look right now, maybe if Mercedes or Ferrari don't have the greatest end to the season, maybe there is still a very outside chance that they could be close to one of those teams at the end of the season. Again, very unlikely, but it is possible. But yeah, McLaren this weekend, I think definitely will be, if anyone's going to be challenging Red Bull, it will be McLaren. No doubt about that. But let me now go back to these pictures and now come to you guys in the live chat. Actually, before I do, let me just plug the upcoming content on the channel. Don't forget, guys, if you are new to the channel, to subscribe, because we do previews, reviews, and watch-alongs for every F1 race weekend. And here is the next 2 pieces of content on the channel. So, of course, because it's a sprint weekend, qualifying, which sets the grid for Sunday's race, will be on Friday rather than Saturday. So tomorrow afternoon/evening here in the UK, I will be live at 4:30 p.m. UK time for the qualifying watch along. I will be going all the way until 7:30 p.m. And it'll be an hour and a half's build up to qualifying. Then we'll do the session, of course, and then a reaction afterwards. And then on Sunday, I'll be live 2 hours before the race starts at 4 p.m. UK time. The build up and then the watch along of the race, and then we'll be done probably by 8:30 p.m. or something like that. Just to let you guys know as well, originally I did have a sprint race preview planned to upload on Saturday morning, just so I had some sort of content on the Saturday to cover the sprint race. I have now removed that from my planned schedule. So these are literally the next 2 pieces of content, meaning on Saturday there will not be any content on the channel covering the sprint race. And if you are wondering, why is that? It's because, obviously, you guys know I don't like the sprint race. I think most people in the F1 community just audibly groan when they know it's going to be a sprint weekend at this point. Even the people that were on the fence about it are now against it. It's just, yeah, it's terrible. I think everyone not everyone, but 85, 90% of people I think at this point can agree with that. But also, because this track is not going to be the best for overtaking, I don't think the sprint is going to have really anything in it that's going to be memorable at all. And the sprint is only 19 laps. And yeah, I think after the start of the race, I don't think you're going to get really any overtaking. Maybe the odd one here or there, but nothing, it's not going to be overtaking every lap or anything like that. It's definitely not going to be, in my view, a good sprint. Probably be one of the worst sprint races we've had, which is why I will not be covering it on Saturday. But again, I will be back on Sunday for the race watch along, the real main event of the weekend. And then remember as well, guys, I will be live on Monday night as well at 8 p.m. UK time for a review of the weekend. Make sure to come along to that. And for everybody watching right now, make sure to smash the like button. We're currently on 19 likes. Let's try and get up to 25 likes if we can in the next few minutes. But annoyingly as well, we've got 3 sprint races to go in the final 6 races, which is so depressing, to be honest. But thankfully, one of them is in Sao Paulo, and we know from last year and the year before, it was probably the best sprint races that we've had. And then the other one is at the Circuit of Americas in Austin, Texas, which will be in a couple weeks' time. I don't think it'll be too bad around that track, the COTA track, the sprint. I don't think it'll be too bad. I don't think it'll be amazing or a proper classic race or anything, but I think it'll be definitely better than this, this sprint race we're going to be getting in Qatar, because it is a lot more possible to overtake at the track in Austin than it is here. Anyway, let's get into your comments quickly, a few of them, before we move on and complete the rest of this preview. Oh yeah, that was another thing I wanted to get into earlier, which I forgot, was, as far as I am concerned, I don't think there are any upgrades this weekend for the teams. I haven't heard of any upgrades this weekend. Of course, tomorrow we'll find out officially who has brought what, but I don't think there's anything, from what I've heard, coming this weekend that really we need to take note of. The only upgrade, really, we need to take note of between now and the end of the season is at the next race in America, Haas are bringing a completely new car, a B car, which apparently will be reminiscent of the current Red Bull car. So we'll keep an eye on that in a couple of weeks' time. But other than that, I don't think we're really going to be seeing any more upgrades this season. Paulie says, I reckon the way it'll be blocked is on safety grounds. Putting 2 more of these larger cars on the grid is a safety issue. So unless they make the cars smaller, they'll probably have an issue. Well, in 2026, I think it's already been pretty much decided the cars are going to be smaller, narrower. Also, they're talking about decreasing the size of the tyres as well. So that if Andretti are going to enter in 2026, I don't think that's going to be an issue, to be honest. But as well, that argument, I'm not saying this is the argument you're putting forward, but I have heard, who was it? I think it might have been Toto Wolff who said it was a safety issue. We've had, not too long ago, we had 22 cars on the grid. In 2016, we had 22 cars on the grid, and it wasn't a problem. Toto Wolff also claimed a few weeks ago that a lot of the tracks on the calendar cannot accommodate 22 cars or 24 cars or even 26 cars, which is factually not true, because the certificate or grade that the FIA sorry, let me rephrase that. Or not rephrase, let me do that again because my throat cut out. The grade or the certificate that the FIA gives these tracks that allows them to, be qualified to host an F1 race, one of the things they have to be able to accommodate is the need for, say if we do have 24 or 26 cars. And of course, back when we used to have 24 cars on the grid, back when I started watching F1 in 2011 and 2012, we had a few tracks on the calendar that are still on the calendar, such as Spain, Monaco, Spa, Silverstone, Monza, Suzuka, Melbourne, Bahrain, China, Brazil, Abu Dhabi. So that argument is completely bullshit. There is definitely, it's definitely doable. It is absolutely doable. And by the way, if anybody here watches Formula 3 on an F1 weekend, don't Formula 3 have like 30 cars? And I know obviously they don't have all of the garages for those teams, but in terms of actual cars on track, F3 have so many more cars, yet they seem to do just fine. So, yeah, some of the arguments that Toto Wolff has put out against it has been so stupid. It's shown that he has I think a lot more of a lack of knowledge, to be honest, compared to others. And Becky says, but why does everything have to have USA in it? With USA, everything gets so money focused. True, but I don't think that's the point in terms of accepting Andretti onto the grid. That's not why people want Andretti onto the grid. It's not because they're American. It's just, Andretti has a motorsport pedigree that's clear to see. They've clearly proven that they can compete at the highest levels of motorsport. Therefore, if they want to enter, they should be allowed to enter, especially if they've got the finances to be able to actually compete. And I think the only reason people have mentioned them, and even me mentioned them being American helping, is because a lot of what the teams have been saying is, but what value does Andretti bring to Formula One? Well, given that Formula One is still so fucking desperate to properly, not dominate, but really get into that US market, having another American team, and not just another American team, but an even better American team than Haas enter Formula One, helps with that. So, yeah. And let me find a couple more comments. Dutch Romanov says, I like to see Yuki getting sponsored by Nintendo and driving the whole 2024 season with a mushroom helmet. Good day to Greg Martinez. Say regards says, to be honest, I prefer sprint races to 2 extra practice sessions. No, I completely disagree. It's just, I think one point I saw someone make on social media, which really described it well, is with the whole the format of a race weekend. Not every session has to mean something. Because I know, obviously, Stefano Domenicali has talked about, let's make practice sessions have points and all this rubbish. Not every session has to mean something. Not every session has to be a race. Just because we would rather watch a race than have a practice session doesn't mean it makes for a better weekend. Especially when those races are a lot shorter than what an actual race is. So, yeah, I don't agree with and it's not your argument, it's an argument I've seen from other people as well, that but it's better than having practice sessions. A lot of the sprint races we've had have been less entertaining than practice sessions. I remember in Baku, the most entertaining session of the whole weekend was practice 1, because we had a couple I think drivers, did they make contact with the wall? I think possibly, I can't remember exactly who it was, and then we had one of the Alpines blow up and have a fire. That was the most exciting session of the weekend. But, it's just... And then, with sprint races, we heard talk, was it earlier this year, that they want to increase the amount of sprint races from 6 to 10. which thankfully they're not going through with that next year, because that would just be a complete disaster as far as I'm concerned, having almost half the races be a sprint weekend. And in terms of the whole debate with the weekend format as to what is the best weekend format for Formula One, there was one format they tried a couple times in the 2020 season that I think is actually probably the best format. They obviously, at the Nürburgring and at Imola, we did a 2-day weekend. So we had no action on a Friday. And then on a Saturday, we had one practice session, then qualifying, and then on Sunday we had a race. I think that is probably the best format for a race weekend because it keeps it literally to the weekend. And then when it comes to this whole carbon neutral stuff, you're not having to travel, as early to these races and travel as much because you're only going as a team member. You're only going there for one less day than you normally would be. And also it's easier, I think, for the fans having it just be on a Saturday and a Sunday rather than like what we've got over the sprint weekend where you get qualifying on a Friday. I don't know why they haven't gone back to that 2-day weekend they tried. I personally enjoyed it a lot more than even the normal weekend format that we have, which is, 2 practice sessions on a Friday, then practice 3 and a qualifying on a Saturday, then a race on a Sunday. I thought just one practice session, then qualifying on a Saturday, then the race on a Sunday. I thought that was great. Really, really liked it. And I think if you did a vote, if Formula One on their Twitter account or their YouTube channel, if they posted a poll asking people, do you prefer a sprint weekend format or a 2-day weekend format? I think the 2-day weekend format would win pretty comfortably. And I would definitely be for that. Regard says, my argument is at least there's some level of jeopardy to sprint races, plus it forces the teams to stay on their toes. Practice sessions just seem lame to me. Anyway, I mean, yeah, they do offer that to sprint races, but I think, there is, to a degree, even with just one practice session, I think it offers that level of jeopardy there. Especially when it's a practice session right before qualifying where, if teams know if they have a breakdown or an accident, then, they're in possible trouble for qualifying. I see what you mean. I do see what you mean, but I just disagree. Serugar also says, what I will say, those races at back-to-back venues are probably better than sprint races like they did in 2020 and 2021. Yeah, if you're going to do 25 or 30 races, then you may as well do literal back-to-backs. I think, actually, if they really want to do, 30 races a season, they may as well have a few of those races be, 2 races at the same track. And I wouldn't mind if they did, say, 2 races at Silverstone, 2 at, I don't know, Spa or Suzuka, and then maybe 2 at Monza. I wouldn't mind if they did that. That wouldn't be. I wouldn't be against that. Yeah. Anyway, let's whiz through the rest of the teams, and then we'll get onto the results of that poll shortly. So let me now go on to Alpine. According to the simulations coming into this weekend, Alpine are projected to be the slowest team here in Qatar, which I completely disagree with. I don't know why the simulations has it like that. I don't think Alpine are going to have the slowest car here. I think the slowest car this weekend is probably going to be Haas, Alfa Romeo, or Williams. I'd be surprised if it's Alpine because I think this track does suit Alpine a bit more than than others. Like we saw Monza, of course, where they were legitimately the slowest team. But I don't expect it to be an amazing weekend. The only bit of encouragement is that Pierre Gasly, of course, had an amazing qualifying here a couple years ago where he, I think, qualified 4th, but he actually started the race in 2nd place. He ended up having a terrible race. He dropped all the way down to 11th in the end. It was a horrendous Sunday for him. But if he can produce that type of speed in qualifying, not exactly that, but if he can tap into that form again, maybe Gasly can get a 9th or a 10th in qualifying, which would be a really good result for the team. And I've got to say, Alpine right now still not having a great time, despite what happened in Japan, where they got a pretty good result of 9th and 10th, because there's been a bit of controversy leading into the weekend with Alpine. Let me just find this this tweet, and this tweet was actually the person who did it. They were covering or they were tweeting about an article to do with Alpine, and I've got to get into this because I think it's so stupid. So stupid. Let me just try and find it. And I'll just get it up on screen quickly. So here you go. So, and this is from lastwordonsports.com, who I've heard have not got the greatest reputation, but they have reported that there are divisions between the French and English personnel at Alpine, and that has been flagged, and that the team staff have been known to book separate hotels, and apparently Renault CEO has made it clear this won't be tolerated. Now, I'm sorry, but this is so dumb, because as someone else pointed out, another F1 content creator who used to be at Red Bull, tweeted about this, I think, earlier today, talking about how it's actually normal for team personnel to book separate hotels because there are so many people booking hotels in the area for an F1 race, so it's not actually uncommon. But also, we need to dispel this whole thing about how if you're working within a team, you have to be the best of friends. You don't have to be. As long as you work well together, you don't have to be friends. There's been so many examples in the past where other sports teams or even F1 teams, they don't necessarily have the best harmony on the grid, and they don't have the best relationships throughout the entire grid, but they work really well together, therefore they win. So I have to say, this is really a lot to do, or a lot of noise created over nothing at the end of the day. And I think another one of the things that came out from this article was apparently team personnel sit at different tables when they eat. Again, it's like, so what? So what? It doesn't really matter that much when it comes to actually having an organization produce successfully. It doesn't really matter that much. Of course, if you have a company, business, whatever, and the atmosphere is toxic and everyone basically hates each other, of course that's bad. But if it's, if you have a company, business, whatever, and everyone kind of is okay with each other and they just get on with the job, and when they work together doing the job, they do everything they're supposed to, then who cares what their actual relationships are like with each other? Anyone that's worked a job, that's worked for a company or a business, or worked anywhere for a whatever that's produced well, knows that not everyone has to be getting on really well with each other. A lot of people in jobs don't even talk to each other, yet when they work with each other, they produce what is expected. So it's such a strange thing in terms of the reporting, because the way it's reported is though it's like this really bad thing for the chemistry and the atmosphere in the team, when really it doesn't even matter. It's just so stupid to me. But yeah, I just wanted to cover it because I saw that a few days ago. It got a lot of traction on Twitter, no pun intended. And I just thought, yeah, it was so stupid because it just doesn't matter. And I think anyone who has worked a real job before knows that stuff like that just does not matter. Anyway, let's go on to the rest of the teams. Williams, not expecting them to be that good. They were disappointing, I have to say, in Japan. They weren't awful, but they definitely could have been a tad better. I was expecting them to be in the top 10 in qualifying and maybe top 10 in the race, but obviously the race said both cars retire. In qualifying, I think they were, 13th at best, which was really disappointing from them. And this weekend, because it's a bit more aerocentric, I don't see Williams really coping that well with what this track demands. So yeah, I'm not expecting a great weekend. Albon will probably end up 13th, 14th, 15th, something like that. But yeah, this is not going to be a great weekend for the Williams team. Neither is it for the Haas team. Really, the Haas team are just waiting for that big upgrade to come in Austin in a couple of weeks, where they can really get back, hopefully, to to performing at a level that can see them score points on a regular basis. Hopefully, by the way, that new upgrade they've got can seriously jump them forward, by a quite a big margin. A half a second or even 3/4 of a second would be nice. Doesn't necessarily have to be as big of a gain as what we saw from McLaren, which was like at least a second, if not like a second and a half. Doesn't have to be that kind of gain, but if it can be, like I said, 5 to 8/10 of a second, that would be a good level of progression, I think, from the Haas team. And yeah, for this track, I'm not really expecting anything. Interesting to note, both drivers, at least in F1, have never raced here before, so that's also not going to help this team. Alfa Romeo were absolutely diabolical in Japan, and I'm not expecting really anything better here in Qatar. Yeah, they're going to end the season, I think, quite poorly, or Alfa Romeo. And finally, AlphaTauri, who should have a decent weekend. I have seen some people predicting them to be ahead of Aston Martin on pace this weekend, which would be really good to see. Them being one of the top 5 teams at a race weekend, I did not foresee at all during 2023. And yeah, from what we saw in Japan, the potential is there. They were very good in Japan. They had Tsunoda and Lawson 9th and 10th in the race for, I think, was it 10-15 laps or so. And their pace during the race was actually pretty decent. So I think if they can get a good, strong qualifying where they get maybe one car into Q3 and then the other car in 11th, I think, yeah, at least a point, if not a couple points from the race is definitely possible. It's going to be very close, though, I think, between, Alonso, 2 AlphaTauris, Stroll, the Alpines as well, as to who does get those final couple points. So it is going to be tough. Also, like I said earlier, great to see Liam Lawson getting another chance in the AlphaTauri, and let's hope he has a great final weekend. We imagine it'll be final weekend in the AlphaTauri, maybe until we see him again back in Formula 1 in 2025 or even 2024 if circumstances within the Red Bull team change. But there you go, guys. That is the weekend preview for the Qatar Grand Prix. Let me just read out a final few comments before we get to the end here. McLaren F1 races. The thing that pisses me off is F1 assume F1 has the time to watch qualifying on a Friday. I don't think it's that. I think it's because they would rather people watch the sprint race because, according to them, a sprint race is more exciting when it just isn't. I think that's what their thought process is behind it. Yanni says, "Only God in response to who is most likely to stop Red Bull winning the Qatar Grand Prix. McLaren F1 Race says, I work and have a business with my ex many years. Chaz, the air is blue sometimes, but we have a common goal to make money. So it can be cordial at times. Yeah, you don't have to get on amazingly well with your co-workers. I mean, I, for a couple years, worked as they call it a casual, essentially, or I was basically an agency worker for the Royal Mail, working in sorting office for a couple years, and there was a few people I got on well with, but there was a few people that I worked with that I really didn't like. But when we got our heads down and we worked, we produced really well, and we produced what was expected of us, and no one would then know there was any potential issue or whatever. It's so, I think the people that actually believe the Alpine story and actually take it for what it is, I think a lot of those people have not actually worked real life jobs. I mean, a lot of the people on Twitter literally have never worked before, because I mean that's the reason they're so popular on Twitter. Some of them, because they've got all the time in the world to tweet. But like I said, anyone that's worked even for a year or so in a real job where a lot's expected of you, you always have people that you don't get on well with, people that you're okay with, people that you're good with, but you know, at the end of the day, you can put whatever differences aside and produce what is expected. It's just, again, it's so stupid to me that people actually looked at that story, and I saw a lot of it on Twitter, people actually looking at that story and they genuinely believed that, Alpine, that it's you know, the Alpine team, the reason they're so bad is because they won't book the same hotel, or they won't sit at the same table when they eat. It's like, these things literally don't matter. Literally don't matter. You know, when people go on a lunch break at the job I used to do, basically everyone would go and sit on their own, maybe except for the odd few people. Basically everyone would just sit on their own looking at the phone for 30 minutes. So, and again, it just literally doesn't matter, but it's funny to look at that anyway. Let's get on to the end result of this poll. So 50 votes in total when I asked you guys who is most likely to stop Red Bull winning the 2023 Qatar Grand Prix. And you guys voted with 63% of the vote for McLaren, Ferrari second, Mercedes third, and Aston Martin in fourth. I would definitely agree with that. But again, reminder, next 2 pieces of content on the channel. Tomorrow, I will be back live at 4:30 PM UK time for the qualifying watch-along for the Qatar Grand Prix. Remember, qualifying tomorrow sets the grid for Sunday's race. And then I'll be back live on Sunday for the race watch-along live from 4 PM UK time all the way through until 8:30 PM. The race preview and watch-along. I don't know yet, by the way, if Nib is actually going to be on the stream. My guess at the minute is probably not, because of the time of the race it'll be. I think 6 PM here in the UK will be probably just a bit too late for him, but I will check in the next couple of days to see whether he'll be able to make it for Sunday's stream. But again, my guess is probably not, and then he probably won't be able to make it the US, Mexican, or Brazilian races. But he'll definitely be on for the last 2 races of the season, which will be, Vegas and Abu Dhabi, because the timings of those, for him, are a lot better. Yeah, thank you guys for coming along. Before you go, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Don't forget as well to smash the like button before you go. Currently on 26 likes, it's trying to get up to 30 likes if we can. Make sure to follow me on Twitter if you want to keep up to date, or with the channel, or X, whatever the hell you want to call it these days. Yeah, make sure to follow me on there to keep up to date with the channel, and make sure as well to join my Discord server, link below in the description, if you want to keep up to date with content. And as well, I will finally just plug a video that I did, or I uploaded about a week and a half ago, talking about why Red Bull have destroyed the competition, especially Mercedes and Ferrari, in 2023. So if you haven't seen that video yet, just posting a link to it in the chat now. Of course, there is a bit of a stream delay, so you'll have to wait a bit. But if you haven't seen that video, there is the link in the chat. Make sure to go and check it out. But guys, until the qualifying watch along tomorrow at 4:30 p.m. UK time, that's an hour and a half before qualifying starts in Qatar, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.